Not only is today a win for the Percy Jackson fandom, but it is also a win for the Sally and Poseidon fan club that I happen to be the president of. Hey guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today we are breaking down episode 7 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. This episode is called We Find Out the Truth, sort of. This is the second to last episode of season 1 of Percy Jackson. I can't believe that we're 1 week away from season 1 being done. I've been covering Percy Jackson news for over a year now, and it's just so crazy. I feel like I spent so long waiting for the show to come out, and now we're here and it's almost over, and I'm so sad. But hopefully, fingers crossed, there should be a season 2 renewal announcement coming soon. And don't worry, I will continue to cover Percy Jackson stuff. Percy Jackson's not going anywhere. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this episode. I loved this episode. I loved it. I'm going to be so honest with you guys. I thought it was a fantastic episode. It starts with a cold open. Normally we get the previously on and then the Percy Jackson title card and then the episode starts. But this started with a cold open at Crusty's. So Percy walks into Crusty's all on his own. Fun fact, the actor who plays Crusty in the show was actually in the Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief movie. He played Charon, the guy who carries them across the river Styx. That's who he played in the movie. So I think it's interesting that he got casted in the show, but he was great. He looked really creepy and I liked him a lot. Now Percy walks in and he already knows who Crusty is and he's already aware that Crusty is setting traps for people. I can already anticipate that people are going to be very irritated by this. One of the main complaints I've been seeing on the internet is people are annoyed that the trio keeps walking into these traps and they know ahead of time that they're walking into a trap. They were annoyed with them knowing that Medusa was Medusa. They were annoyed with them knowing that the Lotus Casino could trap them. And now Percy walked in and he knew who Crusty was. For me personally, these don't really bother me. People will try and say oh, them knowing the traps took all the tension out of the scene. Respectfully, there would not have been any tension in the scene for me because I already know how the scene ends because I read the book. So them changing it makes it better for me. I like the fact that the trio can kind of tell what's going on before they walk into something. I remember being very frustrated reading The Lightning Thief and being why can't they figure out that they're literally right in front of Medusa right now? They're being stupid. I have videos on my TikTok explaining why I think the changes make sense, so I won't get into that too much here. But yeah, the change doesn't really bother me. The whole scene at Krusty's was a little quick, but once again, I'm perfectly fine with that because respectfully, we have more important things to get to. In a book, you can kind of take as much time as you want at little side quest things like that. But when you're in a show, especially you're in the second to last episode and you still haven't even gotten to the underworld, we have more important things that I want to see us do. So I'm fine with them making Krusty's a relatively quick thing. I enjoyed getting to see Percabeth work together, Annabeth with her little invisibility cap. That was super cool and I liked it. That took me off guard. So once again, I think the changes are a good thing. Another change I really liked is the fact that the entrance to the underworld was in Krusty's. I think the main entrance to the underworld is still DOA Records, but I like that the little special entrance was at Krusty's because when I read The Lightning Thief originally, them going to Krusty's always felt like a really weird and out of place thing to me. That's just my personal opinion, but it was always weird that they're okay, we have to go to DOA Records, but they had a pit stop at Krusty's first. I don't know. The entrance to the underworld being in Krusty's makes it feel more intentional for them to go to Krusty's. It makes it make sense. It justifies taking time at Krusty's. So I liked that change quite a bit. I loved how sassy Annabeth was in the Krusty scene. She told Crusty off a couple of times and I thought that was really good. The trio then enters the underworld and then we get our title card. Very interesting that it took them that long to give us the title card. Then we get the first Percy and Sally flashback of the episode. This whole episode kind of goes back and forth between the trio and the underworld and then Sally and Percy flashbacks, which I kind of liked. Basically, we see Sally bringing Percy to one of his new boarding schools, and Percy's just absolutely not having it. And it's really sad to see as an audience member who obviously knows that Sally's just doing everything she can to keep Percy safe. And baby Percy does not understand that. He does not get why his mom is trying to bring him to all of these schools. It's really, really heartbreaking to see, and it's so sad. And it shows, I guess, the sort of trauma that Percy has from such a young age. And it's just hard to watch. And Sally's just trying to be the best mom that she can be. She's trying her hardest, and she's doing a great job. Then we go back to our trio in the underworld. I think the underworld looked fantastic. I'm not sure how the CGI process is done, but if I had to guess, I would say that like the production designer sort of comes up with a sketch of what the underworld's going to look like, and then the production designer works with the CGI artist to kind of make the vision come to life. And the reason I say this is because when I look at the underworld, I can absolutely tell that Dan Heno is in charge of the production design of the show. If you guys don't know, Dan Heno worked on The Lord of the Rings as a production designer, and obviously The Lord of the Rings is like such a fantastic trilogy with amazing production design and set design. So I personally really feel that being transferred over to Percy Jackson, and I feel it especially when it comes to the underworld. It's so like expansive. I was like, wow, this looks good. I can tell that we're in the underworld. It looked really good. We've got Annabeth not really understanding the Wizard of Oz reference that Percy just made because she's never seen a movie. Poor Annabeth. So then the trio pushes their way through like this giant line to get to Charon, and Percy is so sassy in this episode, saying things like only suckers wait in line. I mean, we're all dying to a certain extent. He's very funny in this episode. I like it a lot. Also, the character design for Charon was really scary. I liked that you couldn't really see his eyes. It was good. 10 out of 10 for that character design. We get Cerberus chasing after the trio. Once again, I think the design of Cerberus looks fantastic. I think the visual effects artist did such a good job at making him. We have Annabeth being a genius, as per usual. She figures out how to sort of stop Cerberus from chasing them. Oh yeah, Grover got like eaten by Cerberus, but then he like climbed his way back out. Interesting decision, but the decision makes sense in a few minutes. I did feel bad for Grover though, because he was all slobbery and gross. So Grover flies Percy up to like the top of this wall tower thing. Annabeth gets Cerberus to jump, and I guess she like jumps off of Cerberus's back. We've got Annabeth sort of hanging off of this ledge, and it's very much a reference to Mark of Athena. I see you, writers. I see what you're doing. I absolutely see it. So then the trio is at the top of this wall, and they're looking out at the rest of the underworld, and once again, I really feel like the CGI looks fantastic. Grover realizes that he lost a pearl in Cerberus. Big shocker there. I think most people were able to anticipate that one of the 4 pearls was going to be lost. That was just logical sense to me. I had a lot of people on one of my TikToks get mad at me for spoiling the next episode because I theorized that Percy was going to lose one of the pearls. And I was like, guys, if you can't anticipate that one of those pearls is going to be lost, you got to go back to school. I'm sorry. That should have been a given. A lot of people were freaking out about the change of giving Percy 4 pearls and all that stuff, and I was like, guys, you have to relax. It's very clear that he's going to lose one of them. Come on, it's fine. And it was fine, because Grover lost one in Cerberus. Then we get another flashback to young Percy and Sally. Sally's trying to get Percy into the school, and the school's like, we actually don't want your kid because we think your kid's a little crazy loco, because Percy was drawing a Pegasus, and then Percy was like on his old school building, which is a flashback we saw in episode 1. And Sally's like, I already took him out of his other school. You have to take him. Like, there's no other place for him to go. And it's so sad. The principal of the school recommends homeschooling, and you can see little Percy's ears sort of perk up, like he's so excited at the prospect of being homeschooled by his mom, who he loves so much. And Sally's like, no, I can't do that. You have to take him because this is the only way to keep Percy safe. But Percy doesn't know that, obviously. We go back to our trio in the underworld, and Percy once again is just always trying to sacrifice himself. He's saying that when they get to his mom, the 3 of them can take the pearls and get out of the underworld, and he'll stay back. And Percy's just always ready to sacrifice himself. It's just crazy. So then the trio's running a little bit, and they run into a couple of these creepy looking statues, and Annabeth informs us that we're in Asphodel. I think I pronounced that right. Basically, it's a place where souls are bound by regrets. They're haunted by choices they either made or didn't make, and they're like rooted into the ground like trees. They hear Cerberus chasing after them, so they go to run, They run and they realize Annabeth did not run with them. They go back. Annabeth is trapped. There's vines starting to wrap around Annabeth's leg. And it's like, okay, so that means Annabeth has some sort of regret. What does this mean? Good question. I think this is twofold. On the one hand, I think that this is something added for the non-book readers, the people that don't know anything about Percy Jackson. They're going to watch this scene and probably think that Annabeth is the traitor that we know about in the prophecy, how Percy is going to be betrayed by somebody he calls friend. This scene is definitely like a red herring moment to sort of throw off the non-book readers, the non-movie watchers who really don't know anything about Percy Jackson. Because I've seen a lot of people who really don't know anything about Percy Jackson and they're kind of anticipating that Annabeth would be the traitor. I've been seeing it all over TikTok. So I think that that's one of the reasons why this scene exists. But on the other half of things, if you look at it from a book reader perspective, what is Annabeth's regret? I think that her regret could probably have something to do with Thalia. Thalia has been something that they've really been setting up this season, both with Luke talking about Thalia, Annabeth talking about Thalia on the train, the whole moment they had at Thalia's tree earlier. I think that Thalia is going to be a core theme up until she is like resurrected out of her tree. So I think that Annabeth's regret probably has something to do with Thalia. It could maybe have something to do with Luke, but she doesn't know that Luke is the traitor yet, so I don't think that she'd be feeling any sort of regret about Luke yet. So if I had to guess, it's probably regret about Thalia. Maybe it has something to do with her dad. Maybe she regrets running away. Maybe it has something to do with Percy. I don't know. I'm sure we'll find out at some point though. But either way, long story short, this scene is such a cool scene and I really love it as an addition to the show. Walker is acting his face off in this scene, the way he is like desperately looking at Annabeth because she is trapped and he so clearly feels helpless in the situation. 10s across the board for Walker and his acting. Really, like, very, very impressed because he is seriously so young. And for him to be able to achieve such good, like, acting moments, if that even makes sense, is really impressive. So I really have to commend him for that. So Annabeth is like, I'm gonna take this pearl. The pearl's gonna work. It's gonna get me out. You two keep going. Get the lightning bolt, and I'll see you out there. And then Annabeth is like, I trust your dad to Percy, which is a huge deal coming from a child of Athena. I was like, and then the music during this scene, Grover and Percy have to run. Percy turns around to look back at Annabeth and we see Annabeth sort of disappear into this light. So the pearl clearly got her out. Annabeth is out of the underworld. Percy and Grover keep walking. Cerberus is no longer chasing them. And all of a sudden, Grover starts to get dragged into Tartarus. The shoes are flying. Percy has to run and grab him and keep him from going into Tartarus. Very exciting stuff. They fall backwards and Percy hits his head on something hard. He opens his backpack. He finds out that the Master Bolt is inside of it. Shocked. Everyone was shocked. It was so funny. When I was watching it, I literally had like a no way moment, even though I've definitely read the book a bajillion times and I absolutely knew that the bolt was in the backpack the entire time. I was still shocked somehow. I love the Master Bolt. It has such a cool design to it. I'm obsessed with it. If I could sit down with anybody from Percy Jackson, I literally think that I would choose to sit down with Dan Henna just so I could talk to him about all of the production design that he did, because I'm so fascinated by all of it. So Percy and Grover put 2 and 2 together that if the bolt was in the backpack and the backpack came from Ares, then Ares had the Master Bolt this entire time, but they think that means that Ares is working with Hades. I like that they still have not put together that Hades is not involved. This counteracts everyone's whole, oh, they're making the trio too smart. They always go into things knowing the situation, blah, 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 blah. Well, not this time. They still think it's about Hades. Again, the music in this scene, the score is so good in this episode. Then we go into another flashback of baby Percy and Sally, and Percy is mad at his mom for trying to drop him off at another school. He's literally like, why are you doing this to me? Why are you trying to get rid of me? I would never try and do that to you. And of course, you know, that just breaks Sally's heart. She gets up, she walks away from the table. Hey, I'm so sick of seeing Sally Jackson cry. Hey, let her be happy. We go back to Percy and Grover and they're walking further into the underworld. I think they're in like Hades' castle or something. I don't really know what it's exactly called. I'm just going to call it Hades' castle. And again, I have to say, the production design is so cool for Hades Castle. Like when they're inside of it, especially the part where they like go up on this like little platform, when I look at this, I feel like I'm looking at something from Lord of the Rings. Like this just has Lord of the Rings sort of written all over it to me personally. So Percy and Grover go up and we officially meet Hades. At first, I did kind of giggle a little bit just because Hades had to walk so far to get to Percy and Grover. But he finally gets to Percy and Grover and he's kind of sassy. Like, they kind of let Hades be a little sassy and I kind of like it. Hades is played by Jay Duplass. I think he did a great job. I really liked him. I feel like Hades is sort of very one-dimensional for most of the books. You know, stereotypical Hades, hates everyone, hates everything. But I feel like this Hades is a little bit more reminiscent of like Hades from Hercules, like the Disney animated Hercules, which I love. Probably, I think, actually my favorite Disney villain of all time. I love Hercules. And I love Hades in Hercules. But he's a little bit more like charismatic, a little bit more sassy, a little bit more like sarcastic. And I liked that a lot. I think Jay Duplass did a great job as Hades, and I think that it is fantastic casting. And I don't know if that's what his eyebrows look like normally, or if they just did his eyebrows like that for Hades, but regardless, I love it. The scene where Percy and Grover think it's like a little gotcha moment with Hades, where they're like, your plan almost worked. And then Hades is just like, huh? And then Hades is like, I want my helm back. And Percy's like, your what? Everyone's just confused, and I think it's a very funny moment. I think that scene is supposed to be written with a funny tone, and I was laughing. I was laughing the whole time. So then when Percy finds out that Hades does not want the Master Bolt and Hades is not involved, the camera kind of zooms in on him and it's very obvious that he's thinking. I think this is an example of what would normally be like his inner monologue in a book that we would be reading as the reader. Obviously, we're not in his head in the show, so we just have to interpret it based off of Walker's facial expressions. But Percy's thinking, he's cooking, and he comes up with Kronos. Hey, he's not far off. He actually might be right on the money with this one. And Hades gets very serious once Kronos is mentioned, which I like. Hades like, ask me to grant you sanctuary, and Percy is like, no. And Percy's like, you're not getting the Master Bolt. I'm not asking you for sanctuary, but what I will do is I will take you up on your first offer. I will get your helm and I'll bring it back to you. And when I do that, you're gonna let my mom go. And then he goes, poof, and they disappear out of the underworld. And the last thing Percy says before he disappears out of the underworld is, hold fast, Mom, which I love. Love that callback. Now let's get to the part of the episode that is the most important part, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally get to see Toby Stephens as Poseidon. The crowd cheered. Now, if you've been watching my YouTube videos for a while, you know that what I've been looking forward to the most in this show is seeing Sally and Poseidon together in a flashback. Do I wish that they could have looked at each other? Yes. But I think them not even being able to look at each other in their flashback just makes it so much more heartbreaking. Like, oh my god. So before we see Poseidon, Sally like makes an offering to Poseidon by putting a little match in like a half-eaten milkshake. And it starts to rain instantly the minute she drops that match. And Poseidon is walking through the door like less than 3 seconds later. Like he was ready for her. So Poseidon walks in and he's standing next to Sally and they can't even look at each other. I don't know if that was done on purpose or what. It's just tragic. And I'm a sucker for tragic love. I really am. And like I felt their love in that scene. Like the love that they do have for each other, but the love that cannot be. Oh, I love tragic love. What can I say? Sally once again says one of my favorite lines in the entire show. Sally is always saying my favorite lines, actually, now that I think about it. In episode 1, she said a lot of my favorite lines, but she says another banger in this episode. She's talking about Percy and she's like, I want him to know who he is before your family tries to tell him who they want him to be. I know the writer's room celebrated when they came up with that. I know they were pouring shots, cheersing, having a party when they came up with that line, because it's so good. There's a moment when Sally and Poseidon are talking where Poseidon almost looks at Sally. Like it's like all he wants to do. He's like desperate to look at her, but he can't. Oh. So then Sally asks Poseidon, do you want to talk to him? Him being Percy. And Poseidon sort of looks over to the left at where Percy is sitting, and immediately you hear a giant thunderclap in the background. To me, that's signifying Zeus being like, hell no. Hell no, you're not going to talk to your kid. Absolutely not. This show has so many like small things added to it that just make it so good if you pay attention. I love it. So then Poseidon's answer to Sally's question is not yet. And then we get a good little voiceover moment. And I love a good voiceover moment. Poseidon is still answering Sally, but we see Percy back on the beach where him and Grover landed. And Poseidon's basically like, I'm not going to talk to him yet. I will one day when he knows who he is and fate tells him that he's on the path that he's supposed to be on. When he knows who he is, when he gets to that moment in his life, I will be there for him right by his side. Which is what we're going to see in the next episode because it was a cliffhanger. We see Ares walking up to them and we see Ares have this little smirk at Percy and then Percy uncaps Riptide and that's the end of the episode. Boo. I'm kidding. It was a really good cliffhanger for like the second to last episode of the show. Like that's actually a perfect cliffhanger to really get people waiting for next week. So that's where the episode ends. Overall consensus, I loved this episode. This episode, I think, is tied with episode 5 for me. It might rival episode 5 a little bit just because of how much I love Sally and Poseidon. Once the full show is out, I will have a full video like ranking the episodes of the show. Don't you worry. So you guys will know my ranking of the episodes and I'll go into full detail about them and all that fun stuff. But yeah, this episode really did it for me. I loved it. I loved the changes. I haven't been having any personal issues with any of the changes so far. Obviously the change of the pearls was addressed in this episode. I think that next week's episode will address the whole the solstice is already past thing because it wasn't really that big of a deal in this episode. But I think next episode when he talks to Zeus, it'll be a much bigger deal. But any other changes, like the changes of the traps and whatnot, have not bothered me. And everybody is entitled to their own opinion. If you're a little bit more bothered by them knowing that they're walking into traps, you're totally valid for that, you know, it's whatever. But for me personally, I'm really enjoying the changes. It's still like a kid's show that we're watching, but they've matured it a little bit more from how it is in the books. If it was just trap after trap after trap of the kids being like, oh, what's this? Oh, I don't know where we are. Oh, blah, blah, blah. I'd be like, can they just stop getting trapped? That's how I would feel, I think, if they kept going into every trap being stupid and unaware of their surroundings. I quite like that they're aware of all the traps they're walking into, but once again, that's just for me. Like I said, I have a video on my TikTok talking about the changes, like talking about the critique of the show making the trio too smart, so you can go and watch that video. But yeah, honestly, great episode. Loved it. Adore Toby Stephens as Poseidon, by the way. This episode of Percy Jackson makes me want to watch Black Sails. That's a show that Toby Stephens is in. He's like, I think, the main character. And a lot of the writers from Percy Jackson are writers on Black Sails. I'm sorry, I'm a sucker for a man with an accent. I don't know what to tell you. All I'm gonna say is, Poseidon, if you squint, I look a little bit like Sally Jackson. I'm just saying. But yeah, I think that about does it for this video. Make sure you guys let me know what you thought of the episode. I'm very curious to see how you guys felt about it, especially with how last week's episode ended with all of the changes that were really freaking people out. I'm curious to see how you guys feel about this specific episode. Let me know what your favorite part of this episode was. Obviously, for me, my favorite part was Poseidon and Sally. Make sure you follow me on all my other social medias. I talk a lot about Percy Jackson over there. I've got a lot of videos over on TikTok that are like 2 minutes long, so they're a little too long to post on Instagram or on YouTube Shorts. We're really diving in deep over on TikTok, so make sure you go check that out. Also, make sure you watch my reaction video to episode 7. It was a good one. Got a lot of good reactions up in there. And I can't wait to watch next week's episode because it's just going to be such a good finale. I feel it in my bones. But that about does it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.